My name is Luke, and I am the pastor of youth ministries here at Midway, and I'm glad to be with you guys this morning. We are in a series called Psalms, and we are looking at individual Psalms. Today we're going to be looking at Psalm 14, and I'm just excited to be here with you guys. I don't know if you've ever noticed, like, when you start to read Psalms is a book that it quickly reminds you how you have a hectic pace in your life. You know what I mean? Like, you can read through a psalm and be like, I didn't get anything from that. You know what I mean? But it's because we don't take time to dwell. We don't take time to sit in a psalm and actually let it embrace us. We quickly can get in an attitude of, I already knew that, or, I'm just trying to get through this, or, and we lose that God is actually doing something in our world, and he's inviting us into it. We lose the fact that human frailty and God's divinity is meeting in this book in a way that it really doesn't meet anywhere else. And so I just encourage you, as you walk through Psalms with us as a church this summer, don't rush through it. We're going to look at some stuff today that we have to settle in, we have to sit in if we want to understand it better. So as we get started, I just kind of want to tell you guys a story. So I am married, and 6 years today. Today's my anniversary. I did not forget. I didn't say that first hour. So I've been married, and when I got married to Jessica, we moved 3 days later to Los Angeles, California. So I was, my father-in-law's favorite person because I took his daughter 3,000 miles away 3 days after her wedding. But it was an awesome experience, and we moved out there, and I already had a place for us to live, and it was kind of like a duplex situation, and it was small. It was probably a stretch to call it a studio apartment, but it was our place, you know what I mean? And you kind of enjoy that as a couple in your first house. And so we started buying gifts, started purchasing stuff to put in there to make it even smaller, you know what I mean? And we bought towels and kitchen utensils and all that fun stuff, started to make a house a home. And it was a really great experience. And then we kind of went out and investigated our new city, right? Because Los Angeles is this really awesome place you've never been before. And we hung out with our church that we were out there being a part of. I was going to seminary. We were having a great time. And then about 3 or 4 weeks into this process, we started to see these little bugs hopping around our apartment. Now, none of us are that, and we're not native to Los Angeles. We don't know anything about the West Coast, so we didn't know what these bugs were. We just, we said, we'll just call them Pasadena bugs because we lived in Pasadena. Look at the cute little Pasadena bugs hopping around the apartment. Well, one night, probably a week later, my wife got this idea to Google these Pasadena bugs, and when she looked it up, she realized these aren't Pasadena bugs. These are fleas, okay? These are fleas. Now, I'm from South Georgia, you know what I mean? And so, when it comes to, fleas, I've been around fleas before, and anytime there's a drought, we have beagles at home, and so, the beagles will get covered in fleas, and you have to give them a flea dip, you know what I mean? So I've been around fleas. That's all I'm trying to tell you guys. So when I saw these fleas for the first time for what they were, I said, Jessica, this is no big deal. I said, listen, we're just going to bomb the apartment. We're going to flea bomb the apartment, and everything will be fine. And she's like, no, Luke, I don't think this is, I don't think this is a problem. I was like, no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. So we bombed, and they came back. Well, we bombed again, and they came back. And well, we bombed again, and this time when we bombed, we were lifting up our towels, and there were flea larvae in the towels. So they were actually starting to life cycle in our apartment. Yeah, it was a joy. And so we bombed again. And so now they're in our cars. So we're bombing our cars. You're not even supposed to do that, but we had 3 flea bombs, just like it looked like, fog inside of our cars. I'm sure, we've been breathing it in for forever. And they came back. Now, it turns out that there were 7 stray cats living in our front yard. And they had the fleas on them. But the nice guy across the street from us kept feeding them so they wouldn't go away. And in Pasadena, there was a city ordinance that you couldn't pick up stray animals. So they got to live in my yard rent-free. It was so bad. You would like walk across this like literally quarter of an acre of grass, and you would walk on the cement sidewalk. You would have 30 to 40 fleas on your shoes by the time you got to the other side of the sidewalk. I mean, it was like 5 or 6 second walk. I was like, man, this is crazy. You know what I mean? Like I've never seen this before. My wife is freaking out on the outside. I'm freaking out on the inside. Our little love nest has become the den of evil. And it was so bad, our landlord actually let us break our lease because they weren't going to go away. He just let us break our lease because he's like, man, I feel terrible for you guys. And so we got to break our lease. And so we moved, and 7 months later, I'll never forget, I still found a flea in our stuff. And I was like, I'm not going to tell Jessica. I was like, if I see another one, I'll tell her. But like, if it's just this one, hopefully this is the last remaining one. And that was kind of the process by which we entered Los Angeles. But what was interesting about that story is I tell you that as a metaphor this morning because I was in a lot of trouble and I didn't even know it yet. You know what I mean? Like I was stuck, but I didn't know how bad it was yet. I don't know if you've ever been at that place in your life where you get stuck in a moment, and you realize you're stuck, but you don't realize how bad you're stuck yet. You get into a moment and you're broken down and you don't know how broken it is yet. You know, you're hoping it's the $20 repair, but it's probably the $1,200 repair. And that's the place I found myself in, was this broken place, but I didn't realize how broken I was. Now, I tell you that this morning as a metaphor for what we're going to study today. It's the theme of Psalm chapter 14, and it's the word sin. I tell you that as a metaphor for sin. Now, what's interesting about the word sin is it's just a 3-letter word, but it has so much baggage attached to it. Like the moment I said the word sin, there may have come to your mind or conjured up in your mind images that I can't control, really no one can control. And so when they come up in your mind, maybe for you it was when I mentioned the word sin, you got this picture of all these big white signs, you know what I mean? It says like God hates sinners or God hates sin, you know, and they're protesting a group of people and they tend to hate a certain group of people or that kind of group of people. And that's what comes to your mind when I think of the word sin. Maybe for others in this room, when you heard the word sin, you think of judgment. You think, okay, sin, someone's going to stand over someone else and try and tell them that they're wrong. Someone's going to be judgmental. Someone's going to come into this position and try and speak to someone in a way that puts them down. Or maybe for others in this room, when you hear the word sin, you just think of guilt. You think of this idea of, oh man, this is that sin talk. You know, like I feel bad already. You know, like I have just messed up so much. And the word sin for you is synonymous with this idea of guilt. But today, I want us to open up and unpack this idea, this concept of sin in the scriptures that flows through Psalm chapter 14. And when we open it up today, I want you to see something that God actually doesn't want you, even though this is an awkward subject, even though it may come with baggage, God doesn't want you to remain distant from it. God wants you to engage the problem of sin in your life and not run from it. That God actually wants to do something in you that if you actually begin to see the concept of sin for what it is, see sin from God's perspective, not engage in it, not give into it, but see it for what it is, then you could actually be free in a way that you've never been before. Amen. That the mention of sin as a concept could bring you freedom. That you'd stop running. Let me pray for us really quick and we get started. Jesus, thank you for loving us, God, and thank you for speaking to us about the concept of sin. God, as we open up your word this morning and study it, I pray you would set us free in a way we've never been before. It's in your name I pray. Amen. So beginning in Psalms chapter 14, verse 1, this is what it says. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. Their deeds are vile. There is no one who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on all mankind to see if there is any who understand, any who seek God. All have turned away. All have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. Do all these evildoers know nothing? They devour my people as though eating bread. They never call on the Lord, but there they are, overwhelmed with dread. For God is present in the company of the righteous. You evildoers frustrate the plans of the poor, but the Lord is their refuge. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores his people, let Jacob rejoice and Israel be glad. So the psalmist introduces us in this moment in Psalm chapter 14 to a world that is inundated with sin. See, the one thing we have to do when we approach the concept of sin is we have to realize it has run rampant completely through our world. And that's why my first point, it's not going to win me any theological awards, but we have to dwell on it, and that's this. We have all sinned. And what's funny about that is many times we think that sin is about judgment, but when we realize everyone has sinned, when we dwell on this and we don't actually gloss over it, what we realize is this is an us conversation. That this is a we conversation. This is not a pastor standing on a stage talking over you or into you in some way. You have to realize that when it comes to the concept of understanding sin, we are all in this together. That we are all broken. That we are all affected. And the only way sin doesn't get to mess us up anymore is if we move towards what God has for us. It says it right here in the passage. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. Their deeds are vile. There is no one who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on all mankind to see if anyone understands, anyone seeks God. All have turned away. All have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. Now, I don't know how you've been introduced to this passage, and maybe this is your first time even reading this passage, but verse 1 in this passage was always introduced to me kind of like as like the rebuttal to intellectual problems with God. I don't know if that you've experienced that before. They said, like if somebody has a intellectual problem with God or a doubt with God, like the fool says in his heart, there is no God. But what's interesting is like this verse in the Hebrew is not actually dealing with intellectual doubt. It's not dealing with intellectual deficiency at all. It's actually dealing with a moral deficiency. And so what this verse is actually saying here is when it says the fool says in his heart there is no God, what it's saying is the morally corrupt man says in his heart there is no God. The spiritually bankrupt man says in his heart there is no God. If you have honest doubts with God, that's not what God's talking about in this moment. He's saying, listen, there is a way that you can behave and act and move your heart so distant that you have to separate yourself from the very idea that God exists. And now we might say, well, how do you ever get there? How do you ever get to a point where your actions, your decisions, the things you are doing actually affect what you believe? But I would say if you lean in, you realize that this kind of brokenness touches us all. That this kind of brokenness, we've experienced it in our heart and in our soul before. Like we all have this desire. And it's like these desires, they're pulling us in one direction, which is towards God, and in one direction, which is towards ourself and towards fear. Like we all have a desire to be known. We all have a desire for intimacy, a desire to not have to fake our relationship with someone, to actually be known, even if it's the good parts of us or the negative parts of us. We don't want to have to put on a mask. We want to be able to come into your presence and be accepted for who we are. We all have this desire inside of us. But it's amazing when that desire is opposed, when that desire is made little of, how quickly we turn to dark areas to fulfill that desire. Like when our wife opposes us and our secretary seems to listen a little bit better. When we meet that person at the gym that seems to understand us better than our spouse. And we start to spend time with that person and nurse that relationship. And we realize, well, I mean, I'm supposed to be doing this, right? Because I feel like I'm supposed to be getting close to someone, but it is leading us into darker places. Parents in the room, people that have dealt with a teenager, you've spoken and you've spoken and you've spoken, and they won't respond in the way you ask them to respond. So you say, I'm not investing in them anymore. They don't take what I'm giving them. And so we take darker routes. We put up protection to keep us safe. Or maybe you just decide the antithesis of this desire. You've been burned so many times. You say, no one can truly know me. So you choose to self-medicate through alcohol, through drugs, through food. But you decide you're going to try and forget that you have the desire at all. And what it is crazy is this desire, even though it's broken, is driving you to be more stuck, more caught than you ever realized. And some of us have a desire for impact. Some of us have a desire for meaning. We want to win. We want what we do in our 9 to 5 to make sense and to make an effort that changes the world. But what's interesting is just as that desire, we take it and we go to places that we would never expect. Because the moment we decide that we really want to win, we see someone else that's better than us. And so not only is it about us winning and us trying our best anymore, but we say, okay, I've got to put this person down. I've got to sabotage this relationship. I've got to move forward in a way that cuts corners. I've got to cheat my convictions. I've got to make some adjustments on my taxes. I've got to do things that I don't necessarily think I'm proud of, but in the end, I'll win because the end justifies the means. So we have this desire to have impact, this desire to have meaning, but we are choosing a direction with that desire that is getting us to the point where we are more corrupt than we ever thought we would be. Amen. And then we all have this desire for destiny, this desire to make an impact in the future, to see a legacy left. It's a beautiful desire because we want to give something of worth to our children and to our future generations. But even that desire can become about what color the carpet is in church and what kind of music we sing. It becomes about who gets my stuff when I die. And it becomes about broken and inward focused and becomes this selfish black hole inside of us. And even this desire to see legacy left out in front of us becomes about us, and we are broken inside of it. Amen. And so it's not hard for us to understand this idea that we have all sinned. And so when we take this sinfulness and this brokenness and this awkwardness we feel about our own dreams and the dreams that God has for us, and we go to him, we realize, man, this is the most awkward situation I have ever found myself in. And I can't even achieve what I had hoped for myself. Why in the world would I think that I could achieve what God has hoped for me? And so listen, God, if you exist, if you're even there, I don't want any part of you because I can't even figure out what I'm trying to do here. So the morally corrupt man says in his heart, there is no God. Because he can't deal with the brokenness and the failure that surrounds him. There's a verse in the scriptures in Romans chapter 3, verse 23 that I think sums up this frustration perfectly. It says, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And in the New Testament, there's this imagery in the language of an archer that takes aim at a target and lets loose the arrow. And everything looks good until it falls short. And he takes up another arrow and he aims and he fires and it releases and it falls short. And time again, he fires. And time again, the arrow falls short. And what happens as the arrow falls short again and again and again is we find ourselves in this moment broken, ashamed, and embarrassed. Amen. And we stand here at this moment realizing that all have sinned, that we all have found ourselves at this moment, and we wonder and we question and we're hurting. And this is our perspective. But see, I wonder what, if we want to understand the concept of sin, is God's perspective. Because see, what's interesting is when you turn back to the passage, this is what it says. It says, do all these evildoers know nothing? Verse 4. They devour my people as though eating bread. They never call on the Lord. But there they are, overwhelmed with dread, for God is present in the company of the righteous. You evildoers frustrate the plans of the poor, but the Lord is their refuge. And see, what's interesting is in this moment where we failed, in this moment where we are broken, we find that God is relentless. See, we find that God is saying, even in the few verses before this, you see him saying, I'm searching for one that is righteous. I am with those that are righteous, those that are broken, those that are noble. I stand with them. I am with them. And what we find is we say, God, why won't you just give up on us? There is none that is righteous. All have sinned, God. But God is pressing and pushing into the brokenness in our soul. He is hitting the festering wounds. He is stepping into the things that we won't let go of. And he's saying, what is going on here? As he presses relentlessly into our lives in those areas. And I don't know about you, but there have been moments in my life where I have just wondered, God, why won't you just give up there? It feels hopeless. It seems hopeless. But it's in this moment that we can come to understand the concept of sin. And the best way I know how to kind of explain the concept of sin is with an illustration. So let me pull it out here. All right. So most of you guys know, if you've been around here, you know, your kids in the student ministry, I have a disease called cystic fibrosis. Now, I don't have time to explain to you what cystic fibrosis is today, so you're just going to have to Google it. But this is a therapy vest that I wear, okay? I wear it an hour a day in 2 30-minute segments, morning and night. So I wore it this morning. I'll wear it tonight. And what this does is it shakes my chest. So let me adjust the microphone there. It shakes my chest, and it breaks up secretions and congestion in my chest that can get infected. And when it breaks it up, it allows me to cough it out. So it literally, you may say, this kind of like gives me the breath of life. You know what I mean? It takes care of me. So I'm going to give you a little demo here. Let's get it going. Oh, yeah. You guys hear me okay out there? Okay, good. Yeah, it also doubles as a homemade massage device. So, anyway, any Wizard of Oz fans out there? If I were king of the forest. Yeah. So anyway, I wear this vest, and I do these treatments. Well, I wear it twice a day, every day. Twice a day, every day. Twice a day, every day. Very, very, very rarely do I miss. So probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I was traveling a lot, and so this thing was coming with me. So it was getting put on planes. You know how plane cargo loaders are sometimes. They toss things, and I had it covered in about 1 million fragile stickers, but, it doesn't help. So anyway, so it probably got tossed or it got plugged into a weird outlet or something like that. And through that process, it started to run down. So it started to actually run down. And I didn't notice. Because the sad tragedy of it is like I wear this thing twice a day, every day. So as it started to wind down, I didn't notice that it was actually beginning to die. And so what's crazy is this thing that's supposed to give me life was actually dying in my presence, but I didn't know it. In fact, I probably would have never known it until I got on YouTube one night while I had it on. And I got on YouTube, and I saw this little girl, and she had the same vest as me. And I really don't know why I ended up watching the video. But so she started doing her shake, and it was like, and I was like, man, that is like faster than mine. That is like stronger than mine. Mine looks like it's like getting ready to go to the glue factory, and like hers is like strong and fast. And like looks like it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I called the 1-800 number. I picked up the phone, called some lady out in Utah, and I was like, hi. She's like, hello. I was like, I think my vest is broken. And she said, it probably is. I said, okay, well, awesome. Well, I said, well, listen, what I need to do is I need to order some filters and some parts. And so if you could send them to my house so I could fix my vest, that would be awesome. And she said, no, I'm going to go ahead and send you a brand new unit. And I said, I saw like dollar signs like flashing across my eyes. And I was like, no, that sounds like, that sounds like a terrible idea. Could you just send me the filters and the parts? I said, I can fix it. And she said, no, I'm going to go ahead and send you a new unit. I said, well, why? She said, well, you're supposed to change the filters in this machine like once a year. I said, yeah. And she said, you've had it for 6 years. I said, yes. And she said, you've never replaced the filters. I said, no, there's no way I've never replaced the filters. I said, I've definitely replaced the filters. She said, no, because we keep a record of every filter you order, and it's been 6 years and you've never ordered a filter. And I was like, oh, well, you could go ahead and send me a new unit. Thank you, bye-bye. So in that moment, I was kind of embarrassed, right? And she sent me a new unit, and it was actually covered, so no big deal. And so the vest is fine, everything is great. But in that moment, my broken vest, the thing that was supposed to give me life, was broken. I didn't have the language. I didn't have the construct. I didn't understand what was happening that was going to cause me error and pain and eventually death. Until she gave it to me. Until she said, listen, you're not going to fix this. You need a new one. And see, this is what you need to understand about the concept of sin. That when we get to this moment where we have continually fallen short in intimacy, fallen short in meaning, fallen short in destiny, when we get to this moment, we have 3 choices. In this moment where we realize every arrow is going to fall short, we can choose hopelessness. And there is nothing more horrible and horrifying than the human condition that chooses hopelessness. Because it is one thing to say to your teen, this is hard. I don't know if we're ever going to get through this. It's another thing to shut down and say, you're not welcome in this house anymore. I am no longer your father or mother. You are banished. You are gone from me. For others in this room, you understand what it's like to struggle with an addiction. You understand what it's like to struggle with things that will never let go, that you think will never let go. It is another thing to give in to them, to say they have won, to say I am not worth fighting for anymore. Hopelessness is an ugly, ugly sight in the human condition. Amen. And if we don't choose hopelessness, the second thing is almost as bad. We just start to put the pieces back together. And we go, no, it's not that broken. I can fix it. Give me some super glue. I can make it, put a little makeup on it. It'll look okay. I'll go to church. How you doing? I'm doing good. Everything's falling apart, but I'm doing good, and you go to work. How you doing? I'm doing great. My family's on fire currently, but just like, everything's going fine. And we just try and put the pieces back together. Amen. But see, when you understand the concept of sin, you understand something else. That when you get to this moment, sin, the concept of sin, is not about shaming you. It's about saving you. Amen. It's about saving you. That in this moment where we feel the most ashamed, in this moment where we feel the most unworthy, in this moment God comes to us. And when God comes to us, we think it's about telling us how terrible we are, how broken we are, because that's all we can feel, that's all we can see. We've let ourselves down, we've let God down. But God's concept of sin is not about shaming you, it's about saving you. The psalmist got this. In the last verse of the psalm, this is what the psalmist says. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores his people, let Jacob rejoice and Israel be glad. He said, listen, I see this world of sin. I see this world of brokenness. I see God looking around for someone that's righteous. There is no one that is righteous. And so what I declare in the hope of these Psalms, in the hope of my nation Israel, is that God must save. God must move. God must take an old thing and do a new thing. Amen. So the psalmist declares, and you'll see it all throughout the Psalms as you read through them, God must save. And the beautiful thing is, if you have stepped into a conversation of Jesus, you understand that what the psalmist begs for in words, God answered in a man. Amen. And a man named Jesus came and dwelt among us. And he was fully human, which means he had desires. He had a desire to be known. a desire to be intimately known. But that desire he fulfilled fully in the Father. He said, I and the Father are one. And in that love, in that intimate knowledge of the Father, he spread his love to the rest of humanity. And as he spread that love to the rest of humanity, people were healed, both physically, emotionally, spiritually. And he moved in a way that would not step into darkness, but was fully known by the Father. And so he lived beautifully. He had a desire for impact, a desire for meaning. But he did not cheat his convictions. He did not lay who he was short. And he stood up to the religious leaders and the Pharisees who sought to put themselves above others. He stood up to the Roman sword and said, listen, your kingdom comes with violence. My kingdom comes with peace. It comes in another world. My kingdom is amongst them. My kingdom is victorious. So Jesus did not take a shortcut. Jesus did not move in a way that the Father would not have him move. And so he moved with meaning and impact, but did not see the decay that comes with sin. And Jesus had this desire for destiny. And we see in the scriptures that it says that Jesus grew in stature, both in favor with God and with man. And Jesus realized that he was the bridge between humanity and God. He said, listen, my kingdom is amongst you. My kingdom is here. My kingdom is closer than you realize. There are those that are a part of the kingdom. They don't even know it yet. And Jesus is moving in this way. And what we do in that moment is we look at Jesus and we say, no one speaks like this. Amen. No one has hope like this, Jesus. Amen. Every arrow you fire, that we fire, falls short. Jesus. And so in our jealousy and in our hatred and in our betrayal, we took him and we said, listen, no one speaks like this. There is no hope like this. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. And so we took him and we crucified him. And we said, there, every arrow falls short. And just when we thought the last arrow had fallen short, something changed. Because what we didn't realize, that even though Jesus was fully human, he was also fully God. And so what he said was, listen, no one takes my life from me. I choose to lay it down for my friends. And anyone that chooses to lay their life down for the friends knows the greatest love. Not only do I choose to lay down my life for my friends, but I have the authority, I have the power to take it up again. If you tear down this temple, I will rebuild it in 3 days. I am the resurrection and the life. And so 3 days later, Jesus rose from the grave. And when Jesus rose from the grave, he fired his arrow. And when Jesus fired his arrow, it went past all the doubts, it went past all the brokenness, it went past all the justifications, all of our evil desires, all of our evil behaviors, all the power and the violence of this world, and struck the very heart of God, showing that the humanity that he dreamed of, the divinity that he brought forth, was fulfilled in his Son, Jesus Christ. And in his moment of victory, he stops. Amen. And he looks back at us. And he says this: come, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Amen. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart. Amen. And you will find rest for your soul. And if you have ever found yourself here, you know what it's like to be tired. If you have ever found yourself here, you know what it's like to not want to put the pieces back together one more time. In fact, in 1 John chapter 2, it says this. It says, I tell you this story, my children, so that in the love of Jesus you might not sin. But if anyone does sin, we have an advocate before the Father, the righteous one, Jesus Christ. He is the very atonement for our sins, but not just our sins, but the sins of the entire world. Jesus wants us to understand about the concept of sin, that he is not here to shame us. He is here to save us. Amen. He is here to take us from this moment into all that God created us to be. But it's only when you admit that you are not enough that Jesus can be. It's only when you admit that you need to be unmade that the maker can remake you. You don't need to put the pieces back together. You don't need any more pieces or parts or filters. You need a new life. And so the question is for you this morning, are you going to try and put the pieces back together? Are you going to sit in hopelessness? You say, Luke, it's just too good to be true. It's just, I can't buy it. And so you just start putting the pieces back together one more time. I'll just try hard one more time. I can get it, let me doll this up and make it look good. And then I'll send it. And the most tragic part about that is this. Everyone in this room knows that's a lie. Everyone in this room knows that's a lie. But the truth can set you free. Amen. So the question for you this morning is, do you want to be saved? Not shamed, not cast aside, not try one more time. Do you want to be saved? Jesus is willing and able to forgive you. Amen. So this is what I ask you to do. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me really quick as we enter an attitude of prayer? And this morning, what I want you to understand is this, that Jesus will save you. And the scriptures say, whoever believes in their heart that Christ died for them and was raised from the dead is saved, and confesses with their mouth that Jesus is Lord is saved. And so all that counts is the change in your heart. All that counts is the change that you bring into the reality of your life, that Christ will come in and change you. And so all you have to do is have a desire to see Christ move in your life. So I'm going to pray a prayer. And if you've never prayed before, this may be helpful for you. This may be help put words to the desires in your heart. But if you have prayed before and you want to pray on your own and you just want to say, God, save me. God, remake me. God, change me into the person you want me to be, then you just say it in your own way. The important thing is that you realize this morning that this isn't about changed behavior. This is about God saving you from all those brokenness and failures. So you can pray along with me if you want to step in to this relationship with God that saves. Jesus, thank you for loving me, God. God, thank you that you know every part of me. You know every failure. You know every broken piece. But God, you've forgiven me on the cross. And because of your faithfulness, because of the arrow you fired, because of how much you love me, I can step into relationship with you. And God, I want that now. If you do want that, just tell him that right now. I want that. I want to move with you. Jesus, I pray for those hearts that are saying they want to be saved. Protect them and love them. And now, if you did that for the first time today, no one's looking around, all heads are bowed and every eye closed. If you could just raise your hand in the air and hold it there so I can celebrate with you. I'm not going to come get you and like pull you down here or do anything weird. I just want to celebrate with you. And then for the rest of us in the room, we know that the struggle with sin can be constant. And so, God, I just pray for everyone in this room right now, that as they struggle with sin, they would realize you are victorious, that you will lead us, God, into victory and to power. And so, God, I just pray that anyone here that has allowed sin to kind of creep back into their life, that you would remind them that this is about your strength and your power and your forgiveness, that you would allow them to rededicate you into their life, into their life from you right now, God. That they would allow you in to every aspect and space. We thank you for all that you do. It's in your name I pray. Amen. So the concept of sin is a heavy concept, but it frees us to admit that we're not living for God's best. And C.S. Lewis, I think, encapsulates it in a perfect way. This is what he says. It would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. And my prayer for you this morning is that you realize that it is through understanding the concept of sin that we realize we are not living in God's best, and that you, in his faithfulness, could be free to do so. Jesus, thank you for this time together. Amen. You guys are dismissed.